Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are ready and rested for this last part of our conference. I'm sure we shall hear many interesting things. I'm hoping personally to learn a lot about the Russian market. But the goal of my presentation is to provide you with more insight into other AdBlue markets, as Tim mentioned, existing AdBlue markets, such as Europe, as well as developing AdBlue markets, such as Brazil and China. Europe is the oldest AdBlue market after Japan, and at Integer Research, we have really been following this market ever since its infancy. We publish a quarterly publication, which is the AdBlue and Dev Monitor, and this tracks really all the development in the European and US markets for AdBlue and Dev. Developments in pricing, SCR numbers, and any other issues relevant for this market. Europe is the most mature market and is the biggest market in terms of AdBlue consumption. AdBlue consumption started with the implementation of Euro 4 in 2006, and consumption really took off in 2007, which is when SCR trucks really hit the road. So the market is about 5 to 6 years old. There were, of course, initial problems and issues concerning the implementation, but the market has dealt with those issues quite well and has reached a more mature stage now. And this is why I think that Europe is quite a good case study to understand how the AdBlue market here is likely to evolve and develop. And it's a good case to draw some lessons from. So in this part of this presentation, I will attempt to give you a good picture of the European market, of how it evolved and where we're at now. So we'll be looking at the OEM after-treatment strategies, the main AdBlue market players, quality issues, supply formats, and also the pricing question. Now, currently, there are also several other countries and regions which are implementing emissions legislation. And these countries might be in a more similar situation to Russia. At Integer, we're also covering the evolution of these new markets. And as you might know, we have conferences in all of the BRIC countries, in China, India, and Brazil. And those countries are actually quite useful cases to look at because they are more similar to Russia on certain levels. They are still developing countries, and they have encountered other issues that we have not dealt with so much in Europe. And that's what I'm going to look at in the second part. I'll be looking at China and Brazil in particular. And of course, the main issue, same as here, is the diesel quality, which then influences the regulatory enforcement and leads to delays and even cancellations of emission standards, as we've seen in Brazil. And then we'll quickly look at the OEMs present in those countries, and we'll have a consumption forecast for AdBlue. So to start, this is a brief summary of the European market. So Europe is the biggest and most mature market. And SCR trucks first hit the road in 2006. They were first launched by Daimler. But AdBlue consumption only really took off in 2007, and SCR has been used as the main after-treatment technology by all heavy-duty trucks manufacturers. There were initially some technological differences. There were some OEMs who were using different technologies for Euro 4, but ever since Euro 5, really, all of the OEMs have chosen to use SCR. And this will also be the case for Euro 6. Now, in terms of AdBlue consumption, we estimate that currently we have a consumption of 1.4 million tons. And as seen in Manfred Schücker's presentation yesterday, the original forecast was quite a bit higher, but then because of the financial crisis, of course, and other issues, this is the actual current market consumption we're at. Now, at the moment, the European market is preparing for the implementation of Euro 6, and this means that NOx limits emissions have to be reduced by quite a bit. This is another 80%, and PM needs to be reduced by another 50%. So Europe really was the first major region to be using the SCR technology on heavy-duty vehicles to reduce emissions. And ever since, all the other markets following and implementing emissions legislation have also been using this technology. The US, for example, also China, as we will see later, and Brazil. And this really confirms what we have seen yesterday, that SCR, for several reasons, really is the technology of choice when it comes to reducing emissions. And there was some initial differences, some resistance and hesitations to using the SCR technology. I'm not going to go over the advantages and disadvantages for the technology again, we've seen that yesterday, but just to say that in Europe, the reason to choose SCR was not really because of sulfur levels in fuel, because sulfur levels in European fuel are fine. It was more also a question of efficiency gain, fuel efficiency gain, for example. So let's look at the different European. So in Europe, there are now 6 OEMs dominating the market, and some of these OEMs have been pushing from SCR from the beginning, like Daimler, for example, and others have been using, 2 mainly of them have been using EGR for Euro 4. So we have DF Trucks, which is a subsidiary of PACCAR, and used SCR starting from Euro 4, used it for Euro 5, and will be using a combination of SCR, EGR, and DPF for Euro 6. Then Daimler, which, as I said, was the first OEM to be launching SCR models in February 2006. And they, of course, are using SCR as well for Euro 5, and will be using SCR, EGR, and DPF for Euro 6. Then we have MAN, who was one of the 2 OEMs to be using EGR, and then moved to SCR for early Euro 5. And will be using SCR, EGR, and DPF for Euro 6. Renault was also using SCR from the beginning, and same all the way through to Euro 6. Iveco also using SCR for the first 2 stages, and Iveco is to say, interestingly, for Euro 6, they have announced that they will not be using EGR, so it will be a combination of SCR and DPF. Then Scania was the other OEM not to be using SCR from the beginning, using EGR, and then moving to SCR and EGR, and same strategy for Euro 6. And finally, Volvo, again, all the way through using SCR. The earliest delivery of SCR vehicles was actually half a year before the implementation of the legislation, and the reasons for this is quite interesting, because there were financial incentives. This was in Germany. In Germany, you have a road usage tax, so depending on how many kilometers you travel every year, you have to pay a tax, and this is actually quite a substantial tax that you have to be paying. And so there were incentives, basically, when you were using environmental friendly vehicles, then the tax was reduced. And this was quite a good incentive to take up SCR, not only in Germany, but also in surrounding countries, because Germany is basically the main transport corridor. So this led to the successful implementation of SCR trucks all over Europe. This is a slide taken from our AdBlue and Def Monitor, and we can see the monthly vehicle sales, as well as cumulative vehicle sales for SCR vehicles. Now, there aren't actually any official statistics, but we get quite accurate numbers working together with all the OEMs. And you can see so in the beginning, 2006, not many SCR vehicles on the road. 2007 really took off, and when you look at the 3-month average, you can see how obviously, after the financial crisis, there was a major depression, vehicle sales dropped, but ever since they have really been improving, and in October 2011, sales increased by 13% compared to the same period last year, so that was a lot better than expected. So these numbers really determine the AdBlue consumption. And one of our consumption graphs, so up to 2011, these are actual numbers, and then afterwards it's a forecast we did on AdBlue consumption in Europe. So this is for passenger cars, for heavy-duty cars and non-road. Passenger cars are not included, but we heard in a presentation yesterday that the passenger car market is actually considering using SCR for the implementation of Euro 6. However, this will not be a big volume of AdBlue, even when it is implemented. Then volumes have been increasing year over year. 2011, we have around 1.4 million tons. And this was quite a positive year. Speaking to suppliers and distributors, demand remained strong after vehicle sales recovered. If we want to look at the individual European countries, Germany is surely the biggest market in terms of consumption, and is followed by other big countries such as France, Spain,